Hello and welcome to episode 3 of this raspberry modeling series. So in the last video we went and made our actual raspberry shape. We used mash to populate our druplets, as we found out they're called, on the guide shape that we made. We used the built-in Maya tools to remesh and then retopologize it, so we have this kind of nice quad shape. And like I said in the end of last video, what we're going to do this time is we're going to add all those little like stems or stamen or whatever they're called that come out of these seeds. And as you may have already guessed, we're going to use mash again for that. Maya's really not very good at this sort of like procedural method of doing things. It doesn't have like a good geometry node system. At least built in. You might be able to do something like that with Bifrost, but at least with this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to do it with like the more simple tools in Maya. So to begin with, what we're going to do is we're just going to hide our raspberry because we don't need that guy for right now. So we're just going to click on him in the outliner and press H to hide. How we're going to do this is we're going to create, I was thinking 3 to 5 different stems, different stamen, so that when we go to place them randomly with mash, we have a good amount of variety in like nice different shapes. So to do that, what we'll start with is a cylinder. So you can either hold down Shift, right click, and go to cylinder in the marking menu, or you can come over to the polygon modeling menu and just press cylinder on there. Now, by default, when you create a cylinder in Maya, it will be like 20 subdivisions, and if we were getting really, really close to this, that might be what we want, but because these are going to be really tiny, if we look at our reference here, this is a zoomed in picture to the point where you can see the little hairs. They're very, very small. I eat raspberries all the time because I go and get them from the garden pretty regularly. We have like a plant with them growing outside, and it's the right season for them, so we have loads at the moment. I didn't even really notice these, to be honest, or at least I just don't remember them being there, but obviously they always have been. But they're very small, that's the point. So we only really want a few divisions. So I think we change this to something like 8. I wouldn't go any higher than that. And right now this is going to be way too big, so we're just going to go ahead and scale this guy down. To do that, by the way, if you're not aware, is if the keyboard shortcuts for rotate, translate, and scale are W for rotate, R for scale, funnily enough, and then E for rotate. Or you can just press those here. So we're going to scale this guy down, and then I'm going to quickly re-enable our raspberry just so we can compare the size. And to go into this sort of like X-ray wireframe view, I'm just pressing 4 on the keyboard and then 5 to go back to the normal shaded view. And maybe let's scale this guy up a little bit more in Y, and down a little bit more in all axes, and that's getting closer. I think I might scale him down just a little bit more, something like that, maybe a tad bit more. We can always add some variation in the scale later with mesh. So what we'll do now is we will just increase our length a little bit to something maybe like that. Okay, that's looking pretty good to me. Okay, so now we can go ahead and hide our raspberry again. Next step, I'm just going to pull this up a bit so it's sitting more on the grid. We need to add some divisions going horizontally up in the y-axis, because what we're going to want to do with this is add some bend. If you look at the reference again, you can see like some of them, none of them really come out particularly straight, right? Like some have not too much of a curve, some have really, in some cases like quite a lot of a curve. Like look at this guy, it's almost forming like an S shape, and this one's coming back on itself. So to do that, we're going to need a little bit more geometry in going up vertically here, and we can get away with that, I think, because we only have 8 going around in the other axes. So to do that, we're just going to come over to in the channel box, under inputs you'll have the polycylinder 1 node here, and then you can change the subdivision's height to whatever number you want, but I wouldn't recommend going too high. In this case I'm just going to go with 8, because at render time we can always add some subdivision to this to smooth out any like kinks in the shape, or any low poly looking bits, but 8 I think for the time being should look good. And then this will be our base. So what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and freeze the transformations on this guy, and then delete all the history as well, just so we have a fresh finished model to start off with. And I'd always recommend doing that from time to time, otherwise your scene might get a little heavy, especially if you've been modeling for hours and hours and hours and you haven't cleared any of your history. It's a good habit to clear that every now and then. Sometimes you want to keep it, you might have certain things like deformers, which maybe we'll get into in another video, that will get removed if you delete history. There's a way to avoid that by going delete non-deformer history. But sometimes you need that stuff. Anyway, point is, clear it every now and then. Okay, now that we have one, what I'm going to do is just change the shape of this guy a little bit. And thinking about it, actually, we need to use deformers. So I guess we'll be showing that in this video instead. One I use all the time, really quite handy, just a simple bend deformer. So to do that, we're going to come up to the aptly named deform tab, go down to non-linear, and then bend. And now you won't see anything for a second, but if you press 4 on the keyboard, you can see we have this curve, this line in the middle here. And then underneath our attribute, or channel editor, sorry, we have another node which has our bend inputs. And you can see we've got a few things here like envelope, curvature, low bound, and high bound. So high bound, that's just going to adjust how far that curve goes on this end of our shape, right? And as you might expect, low bound is the other end. Okay, and that's just gonna, the longer this curve is, the more it's going to affect our shape. So if we put the low bound all the way to 0 and then change the curvature, okay, you can see it's not affecting that bottom part there at all. Equally, if I remove the high bound and put it to 0, we don't see anything at all. And it will only affect it, as far as the geometry goes, right? If we had more geometry coming around here, then it would follow the curve around like that, right? But because our geo ends at this height, it only goes so far, and if we turn the low bound back, we get this. But for the time being, I'm going to keep the low bound not too far. I just want to get a little bit of curve, but nothing crazy for our first shape. Actually, let's put that to 0, and then I'll go with something like this. And then maybe what we'll do is we'll go into the vertex select mode, and then soft select with B again on the keyboard, and we'll just change the shape a little bit here, just so we have a little bit of curve. Okay, so this will be our base. And if you're wondering why your cylinder looks kind of like blocky like this, like you can see it faceted with these hard lines, we can actually fix this. We did this in the previous episode too. If we go to edge select, and just select all our edges except for these ones that we'd like to keep hard here up at the top. Hold down space on the keyboard, go to mesh display, and then soften edge. What that's going to do is soften the normals, and normals are just sort of how the surfaces react to the light, what direction they're pointing in, and by softening them, it smooths out those edges and it looks a bit more round, even though if we look at it from the top, we can see it only has 8 divisions. So this will be our base shape. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is just duplicate these. If you didn't know how I did that, by the way, if I duplicate this and then press Shift D, it copies exactly the transforms you did before. It sort of multiplies on top of itself. So you can redo the previous action. Anyway, so now we have 5 of these. What I'm going to do is just add some more deformation to these, make them look all a little bit different. Maybe we'll add like some nice twist to this one and have it sort of curved down a bit. And don't worry about your mesh getting a little deformed when this happens, because really that's just going to add to it. So now we've got like this nice curve on that. Then maybe on this one we'll have it coming like this way. And then maybe this bit will have kind of bending like this with sort of like an S shape. And then I would say try and add like some deformation in all directions. Just so the shapes look a bit more interesting, a bit more natural. Those two are looking a little bit similar, so I might actually have that come up more like this and have this bend a little bit more down. But basically all we're trying to do is create some nice variety of shape so that when we do go to spread these around, it doesn't end up looking too uniform. Because again, like just, I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but it's like whenever you're modeling anything organic, something that exists in nature, there really aren't any like straight lines, or it's very rare you see something that looks very, very similar, and even if it does, it's still going to be off, by a little bit if you pay close attention. So it's just really good to really kind of deform these, make them look as sort of non-perfect as possible, if you like. Although I do seem to be making just the same shape over and over again. That's something that you have to like catch yourself out on every now and then. I definitely find myself doing it, even though I've been doing this for so long. Is occasionally I'll end up making the same shape a few times over without really realizing it. And just keep an eye on what you're doing, and then go back and make any changes if you have to. So let's, for this one, maybe have it a bit simpler. And I'm just using the soft select tool here. Maybe we'll just have it come out like that. Okay, something else that I've noticed is if we look at the reference, you can see some of them kind of flare out at the end like this. Not all of them, but some of them. So we'll just quickly add that to some of our shapes too. We come into vertex select mode, hold down right click, mouse over to vertex and release. We're just going to go ahead and increase the scale of that a little bit. Pressing R on the keyboard and just dragging the middle one here, and then we might even bring some of those like vertices in just to change the shape a little bit, something like that. And then maybe we'll take how about this one, we'll increase the size of those vertices too, maybe a little bit more this time, and just change that shape up a little bit. Okay, excellent. So that is all of our stems, stamen, whatever you want to call them. I'm sure I'll find out what the actual name for those is at some point. Now, like we did with mesh last time, if you remember, we need to reset all of these to the grid origin. Otherwise, that's going to cause problems when we come to actually placing these on the mesh. Then a good thing to do is just, again, select all your objects, delete all by type history, and then just to be safe, modify and then freeze transformations. So now we have all of our stems on top of each other. I'm going to go ahead and bring our raspberry guy back here. Then I am, again, like last time, going to select all of our stamen, come back to mesh, and then click this again to make another mesh network. Okay. Even if you guys remember last time, it's just duplicating our first one out. In what direction would that be? X. But we want to go into the mesh network again and add, like last time, an ID node if I can find it. There we go. And then again, it automatically picks the amount that we have, in this case 5. We're going to set that to random and put the random seed to, who knows, let's go with 7, just for a random number. Then next, if you can remember, what we're going to do is change the distribution type under mesh distribute to mesh, and then we're going to drag our raspberry over into the input mesh and just drop that in there. And what you can see is we now have a few placed on there. So it's going to look a bit weird to begin with, because mesh is just going to kind of randomly place them without any thought about how they're going to be on there. So we're going to have to add a few extra nodes here from our mesh to make these sort of sit a bit more naturally, or as much as we can with mesh. And if anyone knows a better way to do this, by the way, in Maya, besides from using Bifrost or just doing this manually, please do let me know in the comments. We're always open for that kind of advice. I've been doing this for 10 years, to be honest, and I still don't know everything. Sometimes I find things in Maya that I never knew about, despite using it for ages. So yeah. Anyway, let's add a orient node. Okay, and what this will do is it will change the direction. Actually, no, let's not add an orient node. Let's add a random node. So if you remember, what this will do is allow us to add some like random offset to all of our stems. And we're not going to want to go with position necessarily, because that might make them, if I go with position Z or Y, that might make them come off, right? And we don't want that. We want them to stick to it. So we will add instead some rotation just to try and get those to come out a little bit more from our mesh. Oh, accidentally put some position in there instead. Maybe something like that, and let's go to mesh distribute and just increase that up to like 100 or so. And you can see now we have a few of these coming out, and there could be some issues with some not being in the right place, or some sort of floating, but we can always go in and fix those, or some intersecting. But this is just to get us something really, really quick, right? Instead of manually placing them all ourselves. And you know what? I might even increase the distribution up to like 150 or something. Because if you look at our reference, right, there is quite a lot on there. I'm not exactly sure how many it is, but I mean, it's going to vary from like raspberry to raspberry, right? But they looks kind of dense sometimes, so we'll increase that up a little bit, and then we'll just sort of play around with these values until we get something that we sort of start to like. Oh, that looks quite nice actually. If I change some more of the X. There we go. Okay, that's starting to look not too bad. We've got some obvious floating ones here, but that's okay. We can fix that. And I would encourage you just to sort of like mess around with this a little bit. You know, like if you want to try out some of these nodes, see what they do, go for it. Like one of the best ways to learn, and one of the ways I learned a lot, is just by doing things, and often them not going the way you expect or just breaking. But that really is one of the best ways to learn. So have a look at these, see what you can do. But that result does not look too shabby to me. I might actually increase that again up to 200. Just to kind of round that number off. There we go. Okay, so again, like last time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this to take it out of the mesh network and keep it. And then going to delete the mesh network because we no longer need that. What I'm going to do now is just go and manually edit some of these to kind of place them correctly. Not too crazy, just getting the really obviously floating ones. Something like this. And just sort of like quickly go around your mesh and then see which ones look right, which ones don't. And then, yeah, once we've got this part done, we'll probably move on to doing the actual shading, creating the shaders. And we're going to do this all procedurally in Maya. So instead of having like UVs and texture maps, we're going to do this all procedurally because, I mean, looking at a Raspberry, you definitely create texture maps, but in this tutorial, we're just going to do it procedurally, which I think is really, really quite cool. We end up going and using the Hypershade editor and adding lots of different nodes, like various different noise patterns and things like that. And we don't need actual UVs or texture maps. We can do everything just procedurally with various different noise patterns and the other different nodes that we have built into Arnold. So I'll probably split that up into the next episode, which I'll try and get out for you guys, hopefully, within potentially in the next few days, if not by next Wednesday. So yeah, just go ahead, place yours around, or fix any that you need to, and yeah, that's about it for this video. I'll see you in the next one. See ya.